Thanks for coming. I hope you guys liked it. This is my second film at the Maine International Film Festival in its 25th year. Happy to be here. I'll tell you a quick story, just for the history books. When Ken Eisen and Alan opened the Railroad Square, I think I was 6 or 7 years old, and they had bought the building where the theater was going to be, but they hadn't finished the renovations, and they had found seats at, I think through Mickey Martin's store, through Martin's surplus salvage, they found theater seats from a burned out theater somewhere in Boston or wherever, but they had nowhere to store them. We offered our barn in Winslow to store all of the seats for the theater for 2 years, and then when the theater finally opened, Ken gave us a 1-year pass to see any movie in the theater at any time, for free. So I think it was all of the seats that we put in the theater, and then there were a bunch of couches at the original Railroad Square, which sadly burned down. And so I think that was my introduction to independent film, because they were the only ones doing it in New England at the time. Before that, you had to go to Boston. So I did watch some films I probably shouldn't have. I think I saw Harold and Maude when I was 7. It's probably not advisable. The Atomic Cafe, if anyone's seen that. It's sort of a parody of nuclear holocaust, saw that one, and then a lot of other good European films. But it's nice to be back here 45 years later.
Where did you find this guy? Were you playing golf with him?
Eugene. I actually, pretty much the way the story is told is how I met him. It was on a different golf course, Emirates Golf Club in Dubai. They have a par 3 course, which is relatively affordable for Dubai. Amateur golfers learn the game there, and that's what I was doing, because I was wandering around Dubai trying to figure out what to do. I'm a basketball player. There's like 3 courts in the whole country, and I'm not a good tennis player. So I went to the golf course, and he was literally in the same boat. You know, the man behind the woman is the way I look at it. You know, his wife is a high-powered executive. He's successful with what he does too, but he and I had time to play golf, let's put it that way, while we were figuring out our next moves in the city. But yeah, and then I put the whole film together with the experts and the lay people, because that was the story I was trying to tell. I was interested in this happiness conversation, and then I realized it was just, there's a lot of talking, and there's still quite a bit of talking. Hopefully it's the most compelling parts I have in here. But I needed a comedic foil or a counterpoint to show the emotional roller coaster of golf and life.
I was really impressed by all the educators you had on the film. How long did it take you to find all those people, and did one lead you to another?
Yes, one did lead me to another. It took me, it was a process, you know. I don't make movies quickly because I can't stand working with anyone else, so it takes me 5 years to make a movie. And so I had the benefit of time. I didn't think anyone was going to scoop my story on this, because I was the only American in Dubai doing this. There are a lot of other films about Dubai. And the educators, I went to a symposium on happiness. Now, when the Minister of Happiness was established in 2013, I think, I got there in 2014, there was a big buzz about that. And so there were conferences and world government summits where Ohud al-Rumi, Her Excellency, the Minister of Happiness, was speaking, and well-being science and the World Happiness Reports was much more in the news. So I went to a symposium with all of these kinds of people there, and I just kind of walked around trying to find out what they do. I brought a camera. That's where I met the guy, the Emirati, who's from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And then from there, they all know each other. You know, there are very specific schools that are sort of advertising that it's well-being science that's the focus of their school, but all of the schools, there's a mandate. It's not, they don't call it a mandate, but it's basically, they're strongly encouraged to incorporate well-being science and positive psychology into their training. Oh, I wanted to make one note. We were in Ukraine in 2019, so this is just a filmmaker story here, but the war started. I have friends in Kiev. I know some people in Lviv, and I know some filmmakers in Dubai who are from Odessa. And we were watching the film to do the sound mix before the war. The war had started maybe a week before. And we're watching the movie, and I like that part where this woman, Diana, talks about how life is like busy in Kiev and everyone's like a little too stressed out and it's not very diverse. And we were sitting in the sound mix and that scene came up where they just showed downtown Kiev, and those shots are still the same as far as I know. And those neighborhoods are intact. That's St. Sophia's. They're not going to hopefully bomb the monastery. But there was a collective gasp. And I had an ethical conundrum there. I didn't know what to do, so I had to sort of do some research on it and try and figure it out. And my answer was to date the footage to 2019. But if anybody had any other thoughts on that, I'd be interested to know what you think, if that worked or if that was not enough. Yes?
Yeah, you mentioned about the piece with the Ukraine. How did you decide on those places where you followed up for where these people came from?
I followed my wife around Europe for her job. My wife, her job took her to different destinations throughout Europe and the Middle East and the UK, and we have family in the UK. I went to a few places on my own because when the Zimbabwe guy, Brave Man, mentioned the monk and how he thought monks had the best, I kind of wanted a monk because I had a priest, you know, and like I just thought it would be interesting. So Kathmandu, I went on my own. It's only a 4-hour flight from Dubai anyway, although the flight is something, especially the landing. We would go to like Vienna for work, and we would tack on a couple of extra days, and we brought the kids, and then I would just take my cameras out and film whatever I could, and then I would go back to Dubai and just find the most interesting person from that country. Do some test interviews with people, because there's, you know, the priest says it at the beginning, it's 85% expat community. So, I mean, the Emiratis are there, and we all associate with them, but they have their own neighborhoods, and they have their own life that's more local than the rest of us are just long-term tourists, you know. So you can find someone from any country. So that's the way I did it, sort of in reverse, if that answers your question.
Thanks, Doug, for bringing this to us. I'm wondering, in this whole process, what is the insight, the bit that has most stuck with you and that you're going to incorporate into your own journey of happiness?
I think the next film I make will be about one person doing one thing on one day, and I could just film it. And I learned that. For me, the time I spent in Kathmandu with the monk it's very hard not to absorb something when you spend a few days with a monk. Like you come away with it with a different perspective one way or another. And I started meditating because this was a practice, you know. I think one of the things that's missing from the film, sadly, is that there's not enough nuts and bolts of like how all of this stuff is implemented. Like in the school, like what are these meditation exercises? But I feel like that's a whole nother film, and that's more a technical thing. But I did try out a lot of the things that these people were doing. One of them was meditation, which for me generally results in, you know, I sort of sit there in the morning at 5:30 before my kids are up in the dark, and I try to concentrate on my breath, but it ends up becoming I'm witnessing a silent scream in my own mind, which is not what meditation is supposed to be. There's so much noise. But the one thing I got out of that was that even if you don't blank your mind or get to some other place, you come up with a great to-do list for your day. So by the time I'm done with this ridiculous attempt at meditating, I know exactly what I need to do because those are the things I couldn't get out of my mind. And that has made me a happier person. And it's made my kids, because I'm not careening into the next thing. I'm ready. I may not be relaxed, but I'm ready. And the other thing I realized was that you need to think about this idea of how content you are from time to time. Because in the course of interviewing all these people, the one thing that came up over and over again was that a lot of people never think about it. You know, or they think about it so rarely that they have to come back to me. You know, they'll say, oh God. So that was interesting, and it was interesting to see people really, really take a step back and think about it. So that has made me just more aware of myself in that sense, yeah. Yes, Betty?
What made you decide to include your parents?
My dad got really into nonprofit work and philanthropy and the science of philanthropy and the philosophy of philanthropy and stuff. So that was a natural thing, because he talks about that stuff all the time. And my dad's a sociologist, he's in there. And with the social media stuff, he's a good setup man. you know? I guess that's why, you know? I mean, both of them are like soundbite machines. I thought it was a little weird that it was my parents, but I'm in it already at the beginning, so normally I would never have made that leap, but I think they said relevant things, you know, in the interviews. To be honest, part of it was just interviewing them to have the interviews because I had the equipment, you know, but then their stuff kind of worked in those places. There's a lot of, you know, when you're editing a film and working on it yourself for so long, there are a lot of little things that people miss that drive you crazy, but one of the ones that I love that people miss is Sonia, Eugene's wife, talks about having a purpose is important and being charitable. Eugene says, I'm not put on this earth to help people, you know, there's that, and then my mother says, I do not believe I have a purpose at all. But thanks, Mom. But right before she says it, when you see her in the garden, there's I think it's a Japanese beetle on a leaf there, and she just goes, and then she says, you know, I don't think I have a purpose in the world, you know. Those little things are like little gifts to myself, because it's an existential moment, certainly for the beetle. But maybe for my mother, well, she just doesn't even know what she's, you know. I don't know if that answers your question, but sorry. Sandy, last question, appropriate.
Douglas, thank you for bringing this to Waterville. We enjoyed the film. I wonder if you've ever come across Dan Harris, a graduate who was.
Dan and I were in the same class, same year.
You ought to read this book and show him your movie, I think.
Dan Harris, it was another Colby grad. He wrote a book called 10% Happier, and he has a great podcast of the same name. And he's really wide-reaching with his, you know, he's interviewing everyone from the Dalai Lama to the happiness instructor at Yale and all that stuff. But we're on each other's radar, and ideally we'll have a Colby reunion maybe on his podcast. Yeah. But Dan Harris, you should check him out. Go White Mules. Okay, thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. We'll see you outside.